After 20 years of a different winner every single season, the Eagles are finally starting to pull away with the NFC East. Today, Jeff Bell and I, we are going to start the NFC portion of this divisional breakdown series that we do. We're going to go through division by division, team by team, and player by player, discussing every single fantasy relevant player that you need to know about. As always, we are going to start by talking about some of the offseason changes. No coaching changes in Dallas, running back what they had last year. They lost Miles Sanders and Jalen Tolbert. They brought in Sam Howell, Marquez Valdez-Scantling, Tyler Johnson. And then as far as the draft, they went very defense heavy in the draft this year. So the only fantasy relevant addition there was Anthony Smith, a round 7 wide receiver that they picked. But Jeff, we always start with the quarterback here. So we're going to talk about Dak Prescott. This guy has been a perennial QB1 when healthy, and I know that you don't project injuries into your projections. So for drafters who are taking Dak Prescott, if he is healthy this year, should they expect another QB1 season?
Well, I will give a little bit of there is going to be an injury in this division that I did project in, but when it comes down
Oh,
to Prescott,
oh,
the similarities with Dak Prescott and Joe Burrow in my model are really interesting. I've got them. There's just 1 point of difference between the two of them when all my numbers work out to it, and so both are sitting right now as QB1s. I mean, both have very questionable defenses. Both have star wide receivers on both sides of them, and so I think that it makes a natural fit, and it maybe gives me a little bit of warm fuzzies as I work this out that I'm getting to a similar place in Dak Prescott and Joe Burrow, because I think just naturally you would make those connections and see similarities there. And so I think that that's the biggest thing with Prescott's game. We know that overall he does have the ceiling to lead the NFL in passing. He has the ceiling to lead the NFL in passing yards, passing touchdowns. We know he doesn't run like he did early in his career. And so I think he's right at that age where still in his prime, understands the game, understands the other teams, still has the physical ability to get it done. And he's got the talent around him to be able to support him.
and I know you go through these projections as we prep for each show in each division. I'm curious where Matthew Stafford is going to land in your projections as well, because when you talk about a player on a good offense with 2 superstar wide receivers, last year we saw that Matthew Stafford was really falling in drafts, and it doesn't take a lot. You know, we know the unsticky metrics when we're looking at completion percentage and touchdown rate and interception rate. Those are really hard to project year over year, and they can swing dramatically. And when you have like 3 years ago, you know, everything breaks right for Jared Goff and he gives you an elite season. 2 years ago, everything breaks right for Baker Mayfield and he gives you an elite season. Last year, we saw it for Matthew Stafford. I think that's it with Dak Prescott. Like, you kind of know that there's going to be a lot of volume, but it doesn't take much. Like, if the touchdown percentage, the touchdown rate just varies by 1% and just goes up a little bit next year compared to his career average, then we're not just looking at a QB1 season. We could be looking at a top 3 season. And it wasn't that long. Well, I mean, it was a while ago, 6, 7 years ago, but like, we have seen Dak Prescott with the ability to finish as the overall QB1. That was before the foot injury. He rushed a little bit more back then, but still, like, this is a high powered offense, and it doesn't take a lot for Dak Prescott to sneak in to being one of those elite weekly quarterbacks.
Yeah, and I think when you're looking at Dallas, the major conversation around Dallas has been improvement on the defensive side. We know, like you said, they went heavily in the draft on the defensive side. They are excited in camp about defensive improvement, and that's going to be the thing to watch. Did they get pieces together? Because they essentially moneyballed replacing Micah Parsons on that defense and adding talent around the defensive tackles, that getting Kenny Clark, getting Quinnen Williams later in that trade, then adding Malachi Lawrence in the first round of the draft, kind of inventing a way to get some pass rush there. So it'll be interesting to see, do we get these shootout game scripts? It would be surprising to see growth that quickly. Adding Caleb Downs helps on the back end, but that becomes maybe outside of health. The big question with Prescott is it's still going to be in scenarios where he's shooting back and forth, and you would expect going into the season that we should see that. And it's going to be one you want Dak Prescott to be your fantasy football quarterback.
And, you know, we see teams can kind of change their culture, but like you said, relying on Malachi Lawrence, relying on Caleb Downs. Yes, they are very, very good players, but to expect them to come out and just be at their max potential early in their rookie seasons is foolish. Like, we can't expect that at all. So, yes, is the Dallas defense on the right track? Of course it is. Are they going to go from the worst defense in the league to the best? over a single offseason? Absolutely not. And they're probably still going to start the season as one of the worst defenses in the league. I think the hope here is that they go from being like the 30th or 32nd best defense to like the 24th best defense. And that gets them on the right track. And then maybe in 2027, they can be slightly above league average defense. But I have heard this before that, like, well, the Dallas Cowboys, they made a lot of investments in their defense this year. That's bad for the offense. I think you have to take more of a long-term approach. Like, teams cannot just go from being the worst defense in the league to the best defense in the league in an offseason.
Yeah, and Dak Prescott needs just 5 touchdown passes to become the Cowboys, to tie Tony Romo for the franchise's lead in career touchdown passes. So just 5 away. So we're right there. He's already the franchise's career leader in passing yards. He's almost there with touchdowns.
I don't think there's a ton left to talk about with Dak Prescott. He has been steady Eddie for almost a decade now in Dallas. We know the injury concerns are there, but it's the NFL. Every player can get injured. When he's healthy, you are starting him in your lineup. Before we talk about the rest of the positions, give us that thumbs up on YouTube. First of all, if you are watching this episode and you haven't watched the AFC episodes, good luck. You got about 8 hours of content to get through to get all caught up here. Jeff and I are doing this for every single division. What we do is we go through team by team, and then we break down position by position. We talk about every single player that matters. We talk about players we like at cost, players we don't like at cost, and so much more. And of course, if you like this video, subscribe, because we still have 3 divisions left to do. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you listen to podcasts, leave us a review, leave us a comment. We love to hear what you like and dislike about the show. And of course, subscribe there as well, where we have more episodes coming. Jeff, let's talk about the wide receivers in Dallas, because this is where things get fun. George Pickens at camp. It sounds like there is no fear of a holdout or anything like that. He's there. He's ready to play. This sounds like he is up for the challenge of this kind of prove-it deal where he can go out, have himself a strong year, and then get that generational money. We heard some talk back in February or March that maybe he wanted this long-term deal. They put the franchise tag on him, and it looks like he's going to play there. I'm going to ask you kind of a high-level question right off the jump, but you're a professional, Jeff. I know you can handle any of this. How much is last year's data muddied when looking at the wide receivers? Because we saw early in the year, it was the CeeDee Lamb show. Then CeeDee Lamb gets injured. Then George Pickens takes over as the wide receiver one. When CeeDee Lamb returns, he's still dealing with this injury. Doesn't look like himself. George Pickens is outscoring CeeDee Lamb. Can you draw any strong conclusions from last year's production and usage, or is it just too difficult with the Lamb ankle injury?
Well, I mean, Pickens was hurt too. And if you remember back Thanksgiving, Pickens had a dominant game against the Chiefs on Thanksgiving, and it looked like Pickens had arrived. He was injured in that game, and the production never matched throughout the rest of the season. So Pickens was dealing with an injury when that fall off happened. And I think that's an interesting thing as we get into like Tampa, talking about Emeka Egbuka. We run into a lot of these players where there's a very clear dividing line where we know that they were injured after this point, and the production got way worse after that point. So to me, we know George
foreshadowing the Roma Dunze conversation.
Well, there's a Roma Dunze conversation. There's a lot of injured NFC receivers right now, Dave. There's a lot of star NFL or NFC receivers, so we'll get through it. But yeah, I think that we know proof of concept essentially in Pickens. We know Pickens. You know what Pickens is. We saw him translate. The biggest question, we saw spurts in Pittsburgh, but getting him with Dak Prescott what is the ceiling there? And I think Pickens definitively answered what the ceiling was there. And so you would think that with them both being healthy, with Pickens having plenty of reason to be motivated and dialed in, the news came out today that he would be playing on the franchise tag. So having him dialed in, and these two fundamentally complement each other very, very well. The ability for George Pickens to attack the field vertically and open up coverage vertically, the ability for CeeDee Lamb to line up throughout formation, but really work out of the slot and underneath all of that, Pickens opening that up, the ability for them to invert and send Lamb deep. It really is there for all of it, and it's Dak Prescott is the trigger man that can make it all happen. So I think that we have proof of concept that we know that George Pickens is very good and has a very, very high ceiling with a good quarterback. And really, as you look at the rest of this offense, my guy, Ryan Flournoy, certified dude, in on him since before day one. And it's been fantastic to see him rise up. Outside of that, you have Kavonte Turpin gets a little bit of gadget touches, but I mean, do we really think Marquez Valdez-Scantling and Jonathan Mingo are going to have meaningful roles? And I think that there might be, from reading some of the tea leaves and hearing about some of those that follow the team, I don't know that the tight end is quite as set as it seems to we think it is.
So, you talk about the parallels between Dak Prescott and Joe Burrow at the start of the show. Would it be crazy to make some parallels between how CeeDee Lamb and George Pickens operate and how Jamar Chase and T. Higgins operate, where George Pickens and T. Higgins are kind of that go up and get it, the jump ball guy, the downfield guy, the contested catch guy, and then you've got Jamar Chase and CeeDee Lamb, the guys that can play all over the formation. You can give them schemed up touches at the line of scrimmage where they can create after the catch. Like you said, they can also invert and run deep downfield. They can go across the middle. They can go outside. They can beat man. They can beat zone. To me, like, there are a lot of similarities here between these teams that, like, I've never even really connected until we started doing the show, even down to the terrible defenses that lead to shootouts, that lead to even more juicy fantasy production. It feels like the Cowboys kind of are just like the NFC version of the Bengals.
Well, and they're cheaper ADPs than the Bengals guys. I guess Pickens is higher than T. Higgins, but really when you fundamentally you look at Pickens, you're getting the slants, you're getting the digs, you're getting the verticals, and that's what you're getting out of T. Higgins, and the ability to Pickens, we know in the open field, downfield, he can create after the catch, but when you're closer to the line of scrimmage and moving to more of a running position quicker, that's definitely more Lamb and Chase when it comes down to it, which opens up the ability for Lamb and Chase to get the ball everywhere and to work around. You kind of have the explosion for Pickens or Higgins that forces defensive attention there, creates the gravity to allow the star player to operate more or less.
So last year, you and I were both kind of in on KaVontae Turpin. He picked up an early injury, which heartbreakingly happened right after the CeeDee Lamb injury. So it was like, all right, the door's open for KaVontae Turpin to be a full-time player, and then he gets injured as well. Now going into his age 29 season, it seems like Ryan Flournoy has kind of jumped ahead of him on the depth chart. So probably burying any hope that we had for KaVontae Turpin to be anything more than he's been at this point, which is just kind of a kick returner, schemed up touch sort of guy. How often do you see this team playing out of three wide receiver sets? Like, do you think that Ryan Flournoy, who is undoubtedly talented, like, you were on this guy since before his rookie season, you really liked him as a prospect. We saw him stepping up in a big way during the CeeDee Lamb injury, but do you think that he is just kind of a player with contingent upside where he needs an injury ahead of him? Or do you think there's going to be enough three wide receiver sets here that he might be able to find a path to fantasy production on his own accord?
I think they're going to live in three wide receiver sets, and I think it's going to be a lot of Ryan Flournoy as that third receiver. I think Ryan Flournoy has their double-digit touchdowns are in play. I've got him projected for about 700 yards. So I think we're going to get, and if injury to either of the top receivers happens, it really opens it up. But I do think that we will have one of these, great best ball play. I think it's going to be, you're going to be thinking about him, putting him in the flex when it comes down to it. If Dallas is in these shootouts like we've seen historically, it sounds, everything that I have read and heard from those around the team is that Flournoy has really come in, that he is essentially the right-hand man to CeeDee Lamb while Pickens is the wild card. And then Lamb has taken Flournoy under his wing. Flournoy is very similar to Lamb in the extent of he can do a lot of different things out of the wide receiver position. You can line him in up inside, outside. He can work in the short to intermediate areas. He can extend the field. And so as you're kind of like thinking about the Packers, where they have very specialist receivers and you kind of need the pieces to work together. One of the shifts that the Rams made in moving away from Cooper Kupp to Devontae Adams is getting another receiver in there that can do multiple things, that isn't married to the slot the way Cooper Kupp was. And when you have that, then you can get really creative on how you're using your receivers. And I think that Flournoy, relative to especially KaVontae Turpin being the other player that is pushing for time or usage involvement here, that's a very limited route tree that you're looking at with Turpin, and limited skill set, whereas Flournoy opens it all up, which really just leans even further into the versatility that you have with CeeDee Lamb.
So let's talk about Jake Ferguson, because we do excel. Like, you know what you're getting from CeeDee Lamb, you know what you're getting from George Pickens, and I think you and I are pretty aligned on Ryan Flournoy being on the field more than people would expect. So let me ask you that, Jeff. Just like when you're in round 18, 19, 20-year best ball tournaments, Ryan Flournoy is a guy that's worth throwing darts at, because the standalone value could be there that, he can have the random week with 100 yards and a touchdown, but also the contingent upside. So nodding along there for the audio listeners. I think we both know Ryan Flournoy is a nice pick at value. But what the heck are we supposed to make of Jake Ferguson? Through week 7 last year, he was outscoring every tight end in fantasy football. From week 8 onward, he was the tight end 31 in fantasy football. Who is Jake Ferguson, and what do we expect going into this 2026 season?
Well, early in the season, we know he was the number 2 target on the team, and that led into it. He had amazing bounce back. He had horrible touchdown luck for a long period of time. And I think there was something, he went like 17 games or something like that between scoring touchdowns. Cause I remember it was very much a thing when he scored touchdowns, and then he had basically they came out of nowhere, and
59 receptions in 2024 and 0 touchdowns.
Right. And so when he broke through and scored a touchdown, and then the heavens opened and poured touchdowns for him the first half of the year, and then they dried up. But I think it's obviously they have made a financial commitment to Jake Ferguson to be that starting tight end, but the team, those around it, they really like Brevin Spann-Ford. And it's kind of a little bit of the Pittsburgh, where there's like Ferguson's kind of the Freiermuth and Spann-Ford is kind of the Washington, and the Darnell Washington out of this. And Spann-Ford is massive. He's 6'6", 265 is what he's listed at. Can block out the sun. Very, very good blocker. Ferguson's a horrible blocker. And so that's what those around the team are looking at this saying, hey, we needed Ferguson's receiving at a period of time, especially early last year without Lamb out of the lineup. But if we've got Lamb and Pickens and Flournoy's coming on the way that he is, do we need him out there when being a liability, when we're trying to run the ball out of these sets, when we need blocking out of this position? So it's going to be worth watching. I think it's very easy when it comes down to it still to project some level of fantasy relevance for Jake Ferguson, but we didn't really see the other thing with Ferguson. We didn't really see him attacking down the field vertically. He was kind of just basically underneath, like struggle target type go-to, George Pickens was the star pushing the ball down the field. And then if that wasn't open, dump it down to Jake Ferguson.
Right.
Whereas Spann-Ford,
like there was no juice in the Jake Ferguson usage. It was just, I feel like you would just see Jake Ferguson 8 yards off the line of scrimmage, nobody covering him. He'd throw the ball and fall over, and he would just do that 8 times a game.
Yeah, and Spann-Ford is more the big vertical, big tight end that you can send up the seam and really mess with some safeties there. So I think it's going to be worth watching. He was a player that they were really high on in camp last year, and then he got hurt right before the season, and it really just took that out of their personnel and the usage potential package. But that's not me saying that Brevin Spann-Ford is going to be fantasy relevant. That's me saying there are very real reasons to avoid Jake Ferguson this year.
Where does Michael Trigg fit into this, if at all? I know we don't go into a ton of UDFA talk just because the odds of these guys hitting is so slim, but like this is a very, very athletic guy who lands in a team that doesn't really have a clear-cut tight end position. Like, is there any chance of Michael Trigg being a thing this year?
I listened to about 6 hours of Cowboys talk today, distilled down at 2 times speed, and Michael Trigg's name was not mentioned once. So,
was there mention of Javonte Williams, Jeff? Because
Absolutely.
I imagine that you did hear quite a bit about Javonte Williams, and this is a guy. I just wrapped up. We're doing these drafts over at NFFC for the Football Guys Online Championship. $350 to enter, $300,000 prize up top. And Javonte Williams just is not getting the respect that he deserves, Jeff. I got him at the 5'10 in this draft, and the person that I was drafting with was kind of pushing back on the Javonte Williams pick a little bit. And I said, I'm just putting my foot down and making this pick here. Like, this is a guy who is 26 years old, who is the clear-cut lead back with almost no competition on one of the league's best offenses. Like, I'm not scared off by Jaden Blue. I'm not scared off by, I don't even know who else is there. I mean, like, this is going to be the Javonte Williams show, and sure, like, we could pick nits about his efficiency down the stretch last season, but, like, to me, a multi-year contract, like, they have said that Javonte Williams is their running back, and it is just wild that there's still this value on Javonte Williams in drafts.
Hey man, I'm just taking it. I'm taking it and running with it. And it's one that I've talked to with you before on, we see people that force diversification, and I'm telling you, diversification happens naturally, because slam all that 4th and 5th round Javonte Williams you can right now, because as we get into the summer, as it gets heated up, as we really get into redraft season, and I definitely hate the term casuals, but for the lack of better term, like that's what it ends up being. People that like to draft running backs are going to be drafting Javonte Williams, when
In round 3.
the people that don't want to draft zero RB builds are going to be drafting Javonte Williams. And you've done a lot of drafts. I've done a lot of drafts. I haven't, to be honest, Steve, I haven't pulled a lot of early picks. I've been kind of like middle to later round, and I pulled
Same. I think they're trying to
I
nerf
think
us
we're in
on
the
these
outer
best ball
rim. I'm just
platforms.
saying. I think
Yeah, I can't remember the last time I've gotten a top 4 pick. Like it's getting suspicious at this point.
I got a 102 today though, and I got Bijan at the 102. But coming back around, there is a window in the second round where you're sitting there and you're saying, okay, well, like Derrick Henry's on the board, Nico Collins is on the board, Drake London's on the board, Brock Bowers on the board. And sometimes if those guys are all gone, you're looking at there is a tier break that is pretty extreme, I think, towards the end of the second round, where you're saying, well, all right, here's Breece Hall, and maybe I'm thinking about Javonte Williams here because Devonta Smith seems to be the other guy that people are taking here,
You're
and I don't
scrolling
like
down
any
there
of them.
looking at Luther Burden and saying, "What am I doing?" Yeah.
Yes. There is a very, very clear break where, the Drake London, the Nico Collins, the Brock Bowers, like those guys might slide a little bit, or there's that big tier of elite level running backs, and they disappear, and you can be stuck there holding the bag. And it would not be surprising as we get later into the summer, things get heated up, that Javonte Williams slides into that very, very late second round.
Yeah, I was just counting right now. I mean, we got him as like the 18th running back off the board, which is just kind of wild to me. And I feel like, even if we project what he did last year, like this guy, and you just look like, I like Malik Davis. I think Malik Davis is an underrated player, but I don't expect him to come in. Like, they showed us their cards last year. They just want to lean on Javonte Williams as much as they can. And I think that there's this idea, and we talked about this a lot last year, but I think it's still pervasive and bleeding over into this season as well. I think there's this idea that Javonte Williams is just this dusty old running back because he had a horrific knee injury that may have taken him 3 years to fully recover from. Like, just because a player doesn't bounce back immediately after an injury means that they're going to be injured and bad for the rest of their life. Sometimes these injuries take 2-3 full years to return from, and I think a change of scenery did him well. We've talked about this a lot last offseason, but for new listeners of the show, like, Javonte Williams was the dynasty RB1 overall. Like, people were valuing him ahead of Christian McCaffrey, ahead of Saquon Barkley after his rookie season because he was dominant. He caught passes. He broke tackles. He scored touchdowns. He did everything that you want to see from a fantasy running back, and then just destroys his knee. And like, I can't even remember all the damage, but it was like ACL, MCL, LCL, hamstring, like just shredded his knee. And then, wouldn't you know it, like the next 3 years, his efficiency wasn't great. But I think that change of scenery, going to a team that believed in him, where he wasn't in this four-headed Denver committee anymore, I think he just kind of found his footing again. And all of his efficiency metrics, if you look at the yards after contact per attempt, you look at the broken tackle rate, you look at the breakaway run rate, it all returned to the player that he was pre-injury when we were talking about this guy as one of the most valuable running backs in football.
Well, I think what we see with him, somewhat similar to what we saw with Kyron Williams a couple of years ago. There's definitely there is the year where you could get him for free and nobody wants him, and then there's the bounce back year and nobody wants to believe in it. There's like the contingent off that bounce back year where even the next year we're like, no, I was right before. I was right to fade him. This was a fluke.
Right.
And then you kind of need that second year to really hit to get back into it. And we're kind of in that window with Javonte Williams. And I think it happened with Kyron Williams. And I think that why we were so, it's like, now Blake Corum, it's got to, like, somebody's got to take it from Kyron. I don't think Kyron Williams is good. Somebody's got to take it from him. And I think that's, we do get into that mindset as it comes down to fantasy. And I do, that being said, you mentioned Malik Davis, Jaden Blue. So Jaden Blue was a player that did everything wrong last year. And basically, from everything I've heard,
the Louis Vuitton cleats, that story is that's gonna hang around for a while.
From what I have heard out of Cowboys camp, basically the coaching staff sat Jaden Blue down and said, "Get it right these next couple months," and he has come back as a completely different person. And it was something that we do see, and you know, what do we love on this when we talk about these players? Dave, we love second year players. We love the discount on second year
Mhm.
players, the guys that have gotten an opportunity that get a big discount because they don't get heavily involved, but then we still believe there's talent there, there's opportunity potentially there, and then they end up paying off value, just like Kyron Williams. That was a second year player that came out of nowhere. And I think Jaden Blue is really putting distance between himself and Malik Davis, who Malik Davis was kind of by default the backup running back last year
Yeah.
because the coaching staff had zero trust in Blue.
And
Phil
and Miles
Maffa was
Sanders went
out.
down too.
Miles Sanders went down, and they just got to the point where Davis was default. He was the guy that had been in the room, in the locker room for 5 years, and kind of got his shot. Special teams guy works his way up there. Blue is a different level athlete to him. He's different, gives a different look than what Javonte Williams gives, and he is absolutely for free. So I had in my home draft, just my home dynasty league, we just wrapped up the rookie draft, and Andrew Hall plays in my home league. He had the 4.11. He offered me a trade of Jaden Blue in the 4.11 for my 27 fourth. And the way we would do like standings, I'm always the 112 because my team is really deep. We do like best ball like in the background, and so I was like, sure, I will take Jaden Blue and the 412 for the 411 for my next year 2027 fourth. And I think that's the value that is put on Jaden Blue right now. He's not getting drafted in 18 round best ball drafts. He's probably, he might even be close to your dynasty waivers. Go ahead and grab him because he's very, very talented.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not going to push back on a guy who's free in dynasty leagues, but as somebody who did the, scouting reports for the rookies last year, I wasn't a big fan of Jaden Blue. The speed is obviously there, but there's a lot more to playing running back than speed, such as vision and footwork and patience and lateral ability. And I don't see a lot of that in his game. I see a guy that, like, if you toss him a ball on a sweep and there's nobody in front of him, he can beat everybody in an 80-yard sprint to the end zone. I don't know how many of those opportunities there's going to be, but like you said, if he came back a different player, and then I just looked it up as you were talking too. I mean, Miles Sanders last year wasn't good by any metric before, and I mean, he went down really, really early. He was still getting 8 touches per game. So I think that they, like, the Javonte Williams workload, he was very clearly the workhorse, and he was getting the high-value touches. He was getting the goal line work. He was getting the receiving work. But they were still mixing in Miles Sanders until he went down. And then, like you said, they had no faith at all in Jaden Blue. When his opportunity did come up, I made the joke about the Louis Vuitton cleats. For anyone who doesn't know, he showed up with some specially made Louis Vuitton cleats to practice, ended up getting blisters on his feet, and then got benched the week after that when he was supposed to have his starting opportunity. Phil Maffa never was able to get off of IR, and that's why, like you said, by default, it was kind of the Malik Davis show late in the season. But I expect Javonte Williams to handle 60 to 70% of the touches, which is about as much as you could hope for in a modern-day NFL backfield. But if Jaden Blue, like, that's all it really takes. If you can create with big plays and you are efficient with your touches, 8 to 10 touches per game, that can play in fantasy. And if you're good enough with those 8 to 10 touches, and then that becomes 12 touches per game, then all of a sudden you're somebody that starts looking at flex consideration. So not the biggest fan of Jaden Blue, but Jeff, you make a good point that he is just free in drafts, so I'm not going to push back too hard on that.
We buy values. That's all we do is we buy values.
Any final takeaways on the Dallas Cowboys? I mean, this is great for fantasy football. It's a high-scoring offense with a bad defense. It's consolidated to the players that we know it's going to be consolidated to. I mean, we probably spent more time talking about the Cowboys than we actually had to.
Probably did, but I think that really just underlying, I mean, Javonte Williams, I think, is one of the biggest values right now. It's 5'10". There's sharp drafters in that room that lets you get him at that late.
So I misspoke. I forgot about the third-round reversal. It was still 503, but
that's insane. That's absolutely insane.
Yeah, this was a weird one. I mean, running backs just fell in this. Derrick Henry at the 402. That wasn't us. That was a different drafter. But Derrick Henry went at the 402. We got Josh Jacobs at the 412, and then Javonte Williams at the 503. So, like, it felt like we had kind of painted ourselves into a corner. We started Drake London, A.J. Brown, Luther Burden. I'm kind of feeling shaky, like, oh, man, I hope running back falls to us. And then we smashed Josh Jacobs and Javonte Williams, and I just walked out of round 5 saying, let's get Brandon Aubrey a little bit later in this draft and put a stamp on it, because I think we got ourselves a good core here, and was happy with how that one turned out. But anyway, let's move on to a team that we should spend much more time talking about because they have a lot of changes. The New York Giants. Big changes happening here. They brought in head coach John Harbaugh, who was surprisingly let go by the Ravens. Offensive coordinator Matt Nagy coming over from Kansas City. They lost a lot of players. Jameis Winston's gone. Wan'Dale Robinson is gone. Daniel Bellinger is gone. They brought in Odell Beckham Jr., Darnell Mooney, Juju Smith-Schuster, Calvin Austin, Isaiah Likely, and Brandon Allen. And the only notable draft pick, Malachi Fields. They brought in a day 2 wide receiver. Pretty quiet draft offensively, but Jeff, where do we want to start with this one? We usually start with the quarterback, but I feel like this one we should probably start more with the coaching changes here, because when I see Harbaugh coming in, Harbaugh is not your X's and O's guy. He's not a play caller, but I think he's more of a culture guy. And when I see him go out and bring in Isaiah Likely and Pat Ricard, I see him wanting to establish a system that they had kind of similar to the system that was in Baltimore. A lot of jumbo sets, a lot of RPO, a lot of heavy personnels, a lot of quarterback rushing. And Matt Nagy might be the play caller, but I'm sure John Harbaugh is in his ear saying this is what we want to do, right?
Absolutely. And that would be my expectation. I think that they want to run the ball, they want to play physical, they want to establish an identity, and every single thing that I have heard about them in camp is that they are running the heck out of the ball. And I think that that's what we should expect to see. And part of it's the development. They've been vocal about the development of Jackson Dart, developing him as more of a pocket quarterback, kind of trying to. I always cringe when. I mean, you have the PTSD of Justin Fields, but I feel like Justin Fields is a prime example of coaches trying to coach the game out of Fields and succeeding in coaching the game out of Fields. He wasn't instinctual anymore. He was thinking of all the 15 different things that he's doing wrong at that exact moment in time instead of just playing.
You can almost see Matt Nagy like, why can't you play like Patrick Mahomes? And it's like, well, because he's a very, very different player.
Yes. And so that's alarming to me, that, and how often we see, and we've talked before about the first 17, 15 games of a quarterback's career and the second set being different. We see the sophomore slump so often with quarterbacks, it seems, because the league has figured out to attack them. And so I think instinctually, when you look at Jackson Dart's game, there's a lot to like about fantasy. A guy running around, a guy that can definitely score touchdowns on the ground, a guy that can create big plays by extending the play. But if he's getting coached out of that and they're trying to rein him in and he's thinking about that, meanwhile the league has the book on Jackson Dart and is attacking him, there's a lot that can go a lot of different directions here.
Let me ask you a question, Jeff. How important do you think the offensive coordinator position is in Kansas City?
I mean,
it's the Andy Reid show, right?
Yes.
Like, you're just kind of there. Like,
Yes.
you're a puppet. Like, Andy Reid is installing the offense. Andy Reid is calling the plays. I have a take. You ready for this one?
Yeah.
I don't know if we have enough to say that Matt Nagy is a bad offensive coordinator. I said it. And I know that is like blasphemy. Everybody hates Matt Nagy. Everyone points to Patrick Mahomes, his splits with and without Matt Nagy, and says, look at what Matt Nagy did to Patrick Mahomes. He ruined the best quarterback in the NFL. That's stupid. I don't think that is what happened here. We have to remember Matt Nagy, in his first year as a head coach, he coached Mitch Trubisky to a QB 11 season in fantasy because there was a lot of rushing, a lot of RPOs, a lot of getting Mitch Trubisky out of the pocket using his legs. What happened 2018, 2019, 2020, all of those years that Matt Nagy was in Chicago? The defenses started adopting too high shell coverage. They took the air out of the ball. That deep ball, like that 50-yard touchdown season that Patrick Mahomes had, he hasn't had that since because defenses changed how they played Patrick Mahomes during that time. Travis Kelce also got 4 years older and was not the player that he was when Matt Nagy was there in Patrick Mahomes' early career. They lost Tyreek Hill, but the Chicago media looks at everything under such a microscope, and the double doink and the Mitch Trubisky fall off and Justin Fields unraveling and all this sort of stuff. They kind of just threw all of that blame on Matt Nagy, so that when Matt Nagy went back to Kansas City and was coaching a very different team with no Tyreek Hill and no threat of a run game and a much older Travis Kelce and too high shell coverage, it was really easy to just point to Matt Nagy and say he's the problem when he's not doing anything. Like, he's just there carrying a water bottle around for Andy Reid and patting him on the back when they score a touchdown, but he kind of became the scapegoat here. I don't think that this Matt Nagy being the New York Giants offensive coordinator, like, everybody has just said that this is just a death knell for Jackson Dart. I think that is such a weird overreactionary thing, and I am buying the dip on Jackson Dart because I still have faith in Harbaugh coaching a good team, and I don't think that we've seen enough to say that Matt Nagy is a quarterback killer.
No, you're exactly right. Yeah, I'm glad that you mentioned the running game because I was, I'm there and I agree. And you mentioned you hit the Tyreek Hill left, but there was no running game at all for the last
Right.
several years in Kansas City, and there was no, as they can sit deep, two safeties deep, take out the vertical game out of Patrick Mahomes. And to be honest, we are probably at a point, I don't think it's a full generation, but there are probably a lot of people watching football and sharing opinions that have very minimal real functional memory of Patrick Mahomes' deep ability, because it's been that long that he's been dealing with this stuff. That, like, Patrick Mahomes was absolutely lethal on the deep ball to a level that we haven't seen before. And I think that people can understand, oh, well, too high. But I do think that there are a lot of people sharing opinions now and doing different things now and watching football now that they don't really remember prime Mahomes. They don't remember the crazy shootout game against the Rams. They don't remember what the fear that he struck in defenses, because they haven't had the ability around it. And I was listening to the Ringer NFL show, and they did a really good job talking about the talent around the quarterbacks. Like, basically, you remove the quarterbacks, how good are the franchises actually right now? And the Chiefs have really struggled. The Chiefs are not good.
They are Patrick Mahomes. That is the team.
They've really, really struggled in the draft. They've really struggled. They got priced out of Tyreek Hill. It's basically Chris Jones is about it. They had Trent McDuffie, and then he's gone now. And the rest of it, it's like Creed Humphreys, like the best player on the team, essentially, outside of Patrick Mahomes. And so, yeah, it's a significant issue. And I don't know. I just don't. I mean, yeah, I think it's lazy. It's lazy. It's. I don't like Matt Nagy. It's lazy, basically, is the way that it's going there. And I think that when you come down to it, the thing that with Jackson Dart, if you're going to do a projection.
Thank you for pulling this back to the Giants.
If you're going to do a projection model, there are certain triggers. There are certain things that players possess that they bring to the table that are going to make it impossible for them to be very low in projections. And that's what Jackson Dart brings, as long as he's not allowed to run around at all and has to stay in the pocket. There are fundamental elements of his game that lead to scoring fantasy points out of the quarterback position. And I think that so often we are always thinking about upside, always chasing upside, dual threat quarterback to the upside. Some of the thing with the dual threat quarterback is very, very minimal downside. And I think that's the biggest thing with Dart, is as long as he has some minimal level of still running around and still diving into the end zone and still smashing heads with Cam Scatterbo and doing all those things, as long as he's on the field, then he's going to score fantasy points. And to say there's a bottoming out minimum caliber he's just not that profile of a player. And there is the upside that, what we saw last year. It's basically Josh Allen upside.
Yeah, and I mean, he was second in the league in rushing per game among quarterbacks last year, behind only Justin Fields. Like, this wasn't just like a gimmicky, few games that he looked good. Like, this guy was rushing a touchdown almost every single week. Like, just his rushing alone was like him just starting the game with 200 passing yards and a passing touchdown, and then everything else from there on that he did through the year was gravy. Like, he was giving you such a rock-solid floor. I mean, this guy was giving you 18-plus fantasy points in 11 to 14 starts last year. It was just unbelievable, but for whatever reason, people are scared off now. Now, Dynasty, completely different question. Like, I am scared of Jackson Dart in Dynasty. I don't know if he's going to be a starting quarterback 2-3 years from now. But for redraft, For best ball, I don't think they're handing the keys over to Jameis Winston. They're going to see what they have in Jackson Dart this year in this new system. And unless he misses time for a concussion, like he is going to get an opportunity to start whenever he's healthy. So with you on Jackson Dart. Now, like I said, this is a team that we've got a lot to discuss here because Malik Neighbors, I don't know. I don't know what to expect here. I know it's only a matter of time. And I feel like, and I say we as a collective, but also me and you, Jeff, like I've got a bit of a goldfish brain. Like I give myself too much credit sometimes. I'm reactive as well. The last memory I have of Malik Neighbors is him like with a stiff leg, like jogging to first base in that celebrity softball game, not looking like himself at all. But we also have to remember that was like a couple of weeks after his cleanup procedure. So I think everybody right now has this idea in their mind that Malik Neighbors is trending in the wrong direction, had a second surgery on his knee, looks stiff right now. But like because of this, he's now falling into late round 3, early round 4 best ball drafts. Would it take one video of him just like running a smooth route and catching a ball for everybody to be like, oh, Malik Neighbors back up to the top of round 2? Is that all it takes? Like, do we just need something that makes us feel good because it's been nothing but bad news so far?
I mean, probably. Yeah. Well, we
But
thought
what if we don't get bad?
Well, yeah. Well, when we did the AFC East episode, we talked about the fortuitous timing that the AJ Brown trade was done before we did that, because we were going to talk about AJ Brown on the Patriots as if he was a Patriot if that trade didn't happen, and we were going to sweat it out that episode actually held up. But we got that. But even that, we're sitting there drafting AJ Brown in the 3rd round thinking, well, like, I mean, this is mainly because like he looked kind of washed last year, but it wasn't. It was because people just didn't value AJ Brown as the Patriot in drafts, because as soon as that happens, he spikes up the board, the thing that we expected to see. And so, yeah, as much as
we talked about that before the trade, like every day leading up to June 1st, you and I were saying like AJ Brown in round 3 is just like a free square on bingo. Like I don't even have to. I'm just drafting him in round 3 of every draft, not thinking twice. I did a draft on June 1st, right after the trade was announced. He went 111 in that draft. I did a draft tonight. We took AJ Brown at the 203, and it's like we knew that he was going to spike in value, but there's this weird uncertainty, man. Like people, they just want the certainty. And that's it. And like, even if you can be 99% sure something's going to happen, until you're 100% positive, the markets aren't going to react.
Well, you're either going to be ahead or behind. So there's that. But I definitely have plenty of 3rd round AJ Brown sitting in the portfolio. But when it comes down to Neighbors, I mean, you said don't project injuries. There's one player right now that I'm projecting a pupless.
I see 12 games.
12 games. I'm projecting him to miss 4 games and have one more wild card game in there. I think he's going to start in the pup. I really do. And I could be wrong, and I'll be thrilled to be wrong. But I think he's going to start in the pup. So it comes down to it, the opposite end, probably, of the, having that good, if that pup news hits, then you're looking at what? Late 3rd, 4th round. Malik Neighbors, the big spiral and conversation about what do we do with Malik Neighbors, just like last year with Rashee Rice, and like splits on people arguing that you should still take him in the 2nd or 3rd round versus people saying he's completely off my board because he's going to miss 4 games. And so I think that right now I'm projecting Neighbors to have a pup start and miss 4 games because we haven't seen anything positive. We haven't heard, and right now, we've talked before, every bit of injury news across the league feels very optimistic right now. Every guy's ahead of schedule. Every guy's doing what they need to do. But when the pads come on and all of a sudden that's going on, then guys that seem to be ahead of schedule are in yellow non-contact jerseys. And then all of a sudden, well, they're looking like they might miss this first week or those types of things. And the Giants at the opposite end of this have basically been like, oh, this isn't good. We're really worried about Malik Neighbors right now. And, maybe they're playing coy. Maybe they're trying to set expectations, but they're also actually setting expectations with the fan base to say, hey, we don't know we're going to have this guy right away.
So let me ask you another question. If Malik Neighbors isn't ready to go, You look at this wide receiver room, and Darius Slayton has never really stepped up to be the guy. Like, we got these flashes here and there. He's a decent deep threat. Darnell Mooney has been pretty inconsistent. We've got the memories of that 1,000-yard season with Justin Fields a few years ago. Malachi Fields, a rookie that we probably can't expect too much from right off the jump. Like Jalen Hyatt, sure, we were excited about him coming out of college, but I think that ship has sailed at this point. Is there a receiver that you think can be fantasy relevant, or is this just going to be a lot of rushing, a lot of 12 personnel, and a lot of Isaiah Likely?
Well, I mean, it's my understanding that Darius Slayton had a core muscle surgery on April 30th, and I don't know that he has or has not been able to participate in the OTAs that just happened recently. But I was talking to a friend. I mean, we're talking about the Giants. We got to talk about Steph. I was talking to Steph about Malachi Fields, because to me, Malachi Fields, what's the biggest knock on Malachi Fields, Dave, as it comes to like the prospect profile? What does he struggle with?
I would say like probably short targets. I think he's a good blocker. He's a good field stretcher, but like he's not that guy that's going to create immediate separation.
Bingo. He's not viewed as a separator, but
yeah,
you have a quarterback that can run around and extend plays. Malachi Fields is a former quarterback, massive target downfield. It's if he's playing with Tom Brady, sure, I'd be pretty concerned that this guy can't separate because that ball is leaving the hands. He's got a quarterback that is kamikaze quarterback, and if Jackson Dart goes out, Jameis Winston is the same thing, that they are going to hold on to the ball. They're going to extend plays. And Malachi Fields, to me, I don't care that he's not a separator, because he's going to improvise. He's going to be, if it breaks down to Sandlot football and he's running around, he's on the same page as his quarterback. He's finding an open spot. He's getting the ball. And so I think Malachi Fields is really interesting, and he's had a very, very strong OTA session, and they're not hitting out there. They're not doing any of those things. They're really just asking these guys to look the part. And from every report, Malachi Fields has come out and looked really good. And Darnell Mooney has looked to bounce back. We know Darnell Mooney at periods of his career has looked like an actual NFL starting receiver. And so when it comes down to it, they desperately need the Malik Neighbors in this room, because he's the sun that makes all these things work in orbit. But I think they have competent players around it, but it does come to the fundamental question of how much are they going to actually throw the ball, and how much do they just want to run the ball?
And I think Malachi Fields too, like, the numbers weren't great at Notre Dame because it was such a run heavy team. And like, to me, I see him playing a very similar role where, like, sometimes he's going to stretch defenses vertically, but he's also going to get in there, and you're going to see a lot of wham blocks, and you're going to see him kind of play in this, like, pseudo tight end role. So I can see them, like, when they come out in 12 personnel or 22 personnel, and they've got Malachi Fields, it's almost like they have an extra tight end. So I think, like, they're going to be tipping the hand when they come out with Pat Ricard, Cam Scadaboo, Isaiah Likely, Theo Johnson, and Malachi Fields. Like, they're going to be running the ball, and you've just got to deal with like a hat on a hat everywhere on the field. Like Jackson Dart, after he hands that ball off, he's going to be running out there as a lead blocker too. So, I mean, like, they don't even have to pretend to pass the ball. Like, they are just going to come out here with 11 gigantic physical people on the field and just try to pick up 3 yards in a cloud of dust every single time. And I think until Malik Neighbors comes back, that might just be the offense, and we might see some garbage time if they're down or they're forced to air it out. But I think this team is going to try for 3 quarters in every game without Malik Neighbors to just establish the run.
Yeah, and that would be my expectation too. And I'm glad that you mentioned Theo Johnson as well, because I think he's the really underrated piece of this offense as it comes down to it.
He had a touchdown in like half of Jackson Dart's starts last year.
He's like best friends with Jackson Dart, like legitimately best friends with Jackson Dart. Like, he's like Jackson Dart's dude. As much as the Cam Scadaboo stuff, like, he is the right-hand man for Dart.
I tweeted something about Theo Johnson very, very early in the offseason, and I was just inundated with the same reply from so many different people. Theo Johnson sucks. Theo Johnson sucks. Theo Johnson sucks. I don't know who in the industry said that Theo Johnson sucks, and everybody just decided to parrot that, but like, this guy kind of emerged as like the top weapon when Malik Neighbors was down last year. And again, if we're making the corollary to like what they're trying to establish in New York and the similarities to this Baltimore offense, which we've done a lot, Jeff, who played a role in Baltimore that we would expect Theo Johnson to play that role in New York.
The Mark Andrews role.
Yes. So if you've got Isaiah Likely as this move tight end that can line up in line and then kick out to the slot and move out wide, and then you've got your guy that's just glued in line that's going to be that short target, that's going to be a red zone monster that has already proved that he can be very effective in the red zone, that's Theo Johnson. And it's so weird to me that this is a guy with off-the-charts athleticism who is still very, very young, showed a lot of promise last year, but everybody has just slapped the label on him that he sucks. I don't know why. I don't get it. I don't think, I'm not saying he's good either. I don't think there's enough in his resume to say whether he's good or bad, but I know that he's really cheap and he's really young and he's really athletic and he showed flashes last year that should have us buying in.
And he's on the same page with his quarterback. And that, I think, is where it really comes down to. He's on the same page as his quarterback. He's a natural red zone threat. He is a plus blocker on a team that wants to run the ball. And he really, I mean, that's not to bury the lead. That is not to bury the lead because Isaiah Likely is the tight end that you want in fantasy football out of all of it.
I think he will lead the team in targets until Neighbors comes back.
And that's very, very possible. And it's very possible that this team is set up to live in 12 personnel. And especially to some level, you really have to consider the Patrick Ricards and the Kyle Juszczyks as a tight end. As like they should count more in 12 personnel than, like, I'm not even worried about 21 personnel. That's not even a thing anymore. But between having Theo Johnson, having Ricard, having Isaiah Likely, you're going to probably have two of those guys on the field most often. And so I think that that's what it really comes down to it on. There's going to be a very clear role here for Theo Johnson, but Isaiah Likely, exactly like you said, could lead the team in targets. And that's really what you want, especially in this window where we are with tight ends. As we've talked previously about Brock Bowers, we'll talk about Trey McBride at some point. We'll talk about Colston Love. But if you miss on those guys, you're looking at cobbling together an approach for having options, whether it be our friend Andrew Cooper's yin yang theory, whether it be whatever it be, you're going to want plenty of upside if you miss out of that top 6 to 8 tight ends, because you're going to be seeing them every single week. And you're going to want a player like Isaiah Likely that has that potential upside to be the lead receiver there and has the athleticism and can do that, because if that hits in a big way, one of the most significant ways to create value and to make a difference making roster in fantasy is hitting on a late tight end.
So you didn't bury the lead at all. You said that you don't really project injuries. You said Malik Neighbors is the only player you're projecting injuries for. So your expectation, I'm looking at your projections right now, you have 17 games for Cam Skattebo. Do you expect to see Cam Skattebo out there week 1, or do you expect to see a guy wearing a number 44 jersey getting some touches and, like, you know, what I'm getting at, do you think Cam Skattebo is going to be 100% to start the year? Or do you think there's going to be an acclimation period as he returns from this devastating foot injury?
I think that Cam Skattebo is like Deadpool, basically, where I'm not entirely sure that the nerve endings function in Cam Skattebo's body. I think it's like if there's the Cam Skattebo knows one speed, and it's Cam Skattebo's speed, and if he's out on the field, I think that's what you're getting. I just don't. To me, he seems impervious to general danger around him, to the repercussions of that danger around him. If he is able to walk, and then Cam Skattebo is going to be Cam Skatteboing out there.
Yeah, you know, we talk about, like, overreacting to these, like, small little clips we see on social media, and I talk about, like, Malik Neighbors running with a stiff leg in that celebrity softball game. In that same game, I saw Cam Skattebo, who I was terrified to draft, just do a standing backflip and just, like, stick the landing with both feet. And I was like, we're still, like, 4 months away from the season kicking off, and Cam Skattebo's out here doing backflips. Maybe I shouldn't have such a strong fade on Cam Skattebo, because he's one of those guys, like, you look at the injury, and, you know, like I said about Javonte Williams, just shredding everything in his knee. Like, it was like skin holding the top of his leg to the bottom of his leg. Cam Skattebo, that's basically what happened to his foot, except the skin was hardly even holding it. Like, he had an open fracture where, like, broken bones were sticking out of his leg. And like, when I see that, I'm like, okay, this is going to take years for him to get back near 100%. But I think you're right that, like, some guys really are just built different. And, like, the Deadpool joke, like, got a good laugh out of me. But, like, that might be where we're at with Cam Scadaboo.
Yeah, I mean, you've got to feel feelings to feel pain. So maybe like he's just in Scadaboo mode, but I'm gonna have to have a long walk with myself on these projections because right now I basically have Scadaboo as a top 12 back because the way that this offense is shaping up, the way that he was used last year when he was available, it's hard not to have him as a potential top 12 back, and it is an absolutely screaming value where he's going in drafts right now. You've got that little window. We've already talked about Javonte Williams, but Scadaboo's sitting in that window. You've got Josh Jacobs has fallen back into that window. You've got David Montgomery in that window where like these are being viewed as dead zone running backs, and these are guys that would be near first round picks like 10 years ago in the way that we used to play fantasy football.
Anything else we need to talk about on the Giants, Jeff? I know we spent half of our Giants talking about Patrick Mahomes and the Kansas City Chiefs, but I think it was still a good conversation worth having. But we've talked about Isaiah Likely, Theo Johnson, Malik Neighbors, the wide receivers, Cam Scadaboo. We haven't mentioned Tyrone Tracy a lot, so let's tie up the conversation on Tyrone Tracy. Last year we did see that there was just no room for anybody but Scadaboo. And, I do think, you talk about Theo Johnson being such a good friend, I think there's something like Jackson Dart and Cam Scadaboo, like the on-field camaraderie and friendship. There's something to be said for that. Like, they play off of each other so well. Do you think that my thesis for drafting a lot of Tyrone Tracy, especially in hero RB and zero RB builds, is this guy can get me through the early part of the season as Cam Scadaboo heals up, and then I can find a better option. Now I'm wondering if we're even going to get that, because my fear is that once Scadaboo is out there, Tyrone Tracy is just going to be watching from the sidelines.
Yeah, that would be my expectation, because even to lean into it and say, well, former wide receiver involvement in the passing game, Scadaboo's better in the passing game than Tracy, and
there's not much passing volume in this offense.
No, and when it really comes down to it, it's you want to disguise packages, you want to not tip your hand on that. You're just not you don't have the pocket quarterback that needs the personal protector, that needs that. You have the guy that you would want to run RPOs off of and have Scadaboo smash up inside and have Dart hold it, pull the ball and roll out and go that way versus having Tracy work in there. And even when it comes down to it, if Scadaboo were to miss time, I mean, this could be a split backfield between Tracy and Devin Singletary. Like, Devin Singletary ends up somehow getting his 600 yards every year, it seems like, for somehow. But it's, I don't want to call him a cockroach, but he's like basically kind of is. You just can't kill him. He's going to be around. You're going to have that Devin Singletary spot start every single year, it seems like. But yeah, I think when it really comes down to it, I mean, like we talked about, the ability for Dart creates what should probably be a pretty safe floor absent injury. The upside for Scadaboo as a potential top 12 back, the upside for Likely in this offense that will be desperate for receivers, and the potential that a healthy Malik Neighbors doesn't have any meaningful target competition, and we can get right back to Malik Neighbors comfortably leading the league in targets. All of that is very, very much in play, and I'm excited to see this team, because one of the things that I do fundamentally believe is we have seen a city be lit on fire by the New York Knicks winning the championship.
Yeah.
And more often than not, we see, that something happens in basketball, and then all of a sudden the Giants come out and they are 7-1 because they're just the vibes. It's a very, very real thing. It is like just kind of involves and invokes and envelops the city. And I wouldn't be surprised at all to see the Giants carry some of that good feelings off the Knicks and be a very, very strong competitive team this year.
Yeah, I can attest to that. I moved to the city of Chicago. I grew up in the suburbs, but I moved to Chicago in 2009 when the Blackhawks broke their huge Stanley Cup streak and was there for all of those wins. And I lived there through the Cubs breaking their streak as well. And the energy in the city is just palpable for months after they win that. You can't even really describe what it's like. It is just like a really, really cool feeling. And I'm sure, I haven't been in New York. I'm actually going there in a few weeks, and I'm sure the energy will still be through the roof. I'm sure there will be street vendors selling Knicks merch and all that sort of stuff. Like, it really is a real thing that, like, the whole city just gets elevated after one of those big wins.
And I'm the Midwest. Indianapolis is not that far away from me, and we saw the Pacers last spring come down to a game 7, really surprising. And the city was behind them in very much the same way. And I remember doing our staff draft and being on a call for that. And our Matt Montgomery is a big Pacers fan and local to the area. And he was talking about how much energy there was. And then what happens after that? The Indiana Hoosiers go out and win the national championship. And you can't tell me that when there's infectious positivity in a genuine way, that it really lifts all ships.
Completely in agreement with you here. So, are we ready to move on to the Philadelphia Eagles, Jeff?
Yeah, we talked about all this positivity. Now let's talk about Philadelphia, city of brotherly love.
On to Philadelphia. Swapped out the offensive coordinators. They do every single year. Now bringing in Sean Mannion. Players lost to A.J. Brown, Jahan Dotson, Andy Dalton, Sam Howell, A.J. Dillon, Kylan Granson. They brought in Hollywood Brown, Dontavian Wicks, Morty Toure, Elijah Moore, Damian Pierce, Johnny Munt, Stone Smart. And Jeff, I believe just today we got news. I didn't even update the show sheet yet. Is it Eric Ezekuma, right? The old Ohio State wide receiver?
He's a Texas Tech guy, I thought.
Oh, was he Texas Tech? I don't know why I thought. Yeah, they just they brought him in
because he sounds like sounds like a Emeka Egbuka. Probably is where your mind
maybe
went
there. I think that's what it was. Yeah, so they brought him in as well. So really just and then in the draft, of course, Mekhi Lemon, Eli Stowers, Cole Payton. So they lost AJ Brown and basically brought in like 12 new wide receivers to audition, like saying, hopefully we can find somebody who can play opposite Devonta Smith. But let's start there. We normally start with the quarterbacks, but I do want to start with Devonta Smith because, I jokingly said it, but like we hope Mekhi Lemon can step up, but he's been dealing with an injury of his own, hasn't really been able to do so much this offseason so far. And then you've just got names, Wicks, Brown, Moore, like all of these guys that are there. But when I look at this depth chart, I just see 160 targets going to Devonta Smith because there's not much else in this receiving game. And I know it's a low-volume offense, but somebody's got to catch passes there, and Devonta Smith seems like the only real threat.
Yeah, I hear you. I think that the low volume is a significant factor when it comes to the overall. I mean, I have very, very healthy target share going to Devonta Smith, but the numbers don't end up super high because I think it is going to be a physical run the ball offense. And Dallas Goedert was talking about how this offense really favors tight ends, and there are names that we know, but Dontavian Wicks following Sean Mannion over, I think is very meaningful. And from everything that I've heard from early reports, he's basically solidified himself as the wide receiver 2 outside opposite Devonta Smith, with Mekhi Lemon kind of basically has to work his way in through the slot, and maybe in time he can take that over from Wicks. But the familiarity with the system that's being put in is very favorable for Wicks, and it's a player that they went out, they traded for, they gave him some money right when they traded for him. He followed a coach that knows him over, and I think that he is the nominal wide receiver 2 within this offense. But I think that when it comes down to it, yes, you've got Devonta Smith clearly out in front, and then Mekhi Lemon and Dontavian Wicks, Dallas Goedert are probably all going to end up to somewhat similar level as the collective wide receiver 2, more or less target 2 within this offense behind Smith.
So are we just, I don't want to use the term burying, but like, I feel like I have been the torchbearer for Hollywood Brown for the last 5 years. Do we think that this is just kind of a depth piece at this point? I mean, like we saw the flashes in Baltimore. We saw a 6-game stretch in Arizona, and then we saw kind of nothing, just injuries and hope in Kansas City. And injuries and hope, I think, like if there was a memoir written on Hollywood Brown, that's probably what he would name it. Like, we just haven't ever seen it materialize for more than like a few games at a time. So are we just kind of at the point now where we're just done with it? I mean, we're looking at a first round pick here, still 29 years old. Like, I could talk myself into it, but I don't want to because I've been hurt by Hollywood Brown so many times.
No, he's done in my book. I probably have him on some dynasty rosters that I need to actually just cut him on, but I would
Yeah.
be surprised. And I think that what happened, because I mean, please YouTube correct me if I'm wrong, but to my understanding, they brought in Hollywood Brown, they brought in Elijah Moore before they did the trade for Dontavian Wicks, and we
That's
know
true.
it was definitely the trade before the trade for AJ Brown.
And then
But
they brought in Samori Toure, who, like, not a huge name, but another guy from that knows Sean Mannion. So, like,
yeah,
there's a reason that multiple Green Bay receivers are now in Philadelphia.
but I think they basically they knew Brown was gone when the season ended last year, and they were operating as if he was gone. They had open free agency, so they went out, signed Hollywood Brown, signed Elijah Moore, signed guys that could be competent at some level, not knowing how the draft would play out, not knowing how that they would be able to have the opportunity to go out and get Wicks, a player that Mannion knows, and then obviously landing in the draft, getting Mekhi Lemon, then making the actual move to move AJ Brown off. I mean, they're Hollywood Brown and Elijah Moore were signed here at point A, and then point B, C, D, and
Yeah,
E all
right.
happened
Yeah,
to
yeah.
say goodbye.
All right. Well, we talked for 45 seconds about Hollywood Brown, and that's probably 30 seconds too much. So let's move on to the tight ends here. Dallas Goedert, is he just another one of the best tight end values in drafts this year, like he has been for the last few seasons?
I love him in value, and I don't know why there's any reason to fade off of given his value, but I've seen it out there
Because
that
Eli Stowers, everybody thinks that Eli Stowers is going to come in and put him out of a job, not realizing that they might both have a TE next to their name on the depth chart, but are two very, very different positions.
yeah, I mean, I think teams legitimately viewed Stowers as a wide receiver, basically, and it
Yeah.
comes down to it. And they viewed him as a wide receiver, and they just like, you got to learn to play wide receiver. So I think that factored into him dropping lower. I mean, it comes, the bullets are flying, and Hurts is out there. He's going to go to the guys he trusts. It's going to be Devonta Smith. It's going to be Dallas Goedert as the guys that he trusts, that he's comfortable with. Goddard, I just had a quote the other day that Goddard was talking about how tight end friendly this offense is, and work the numbers.
Mm-hmm.
I feel like I'm definitely low on the numbers for Goddard, but at the same time, again, it's overall question of volume within this offense. And so I like the value. I've been drafting Goddard, and especially in best ball formats when you can get those spike weeks. But traditionally,
And what I was, I think with a lot of these tight ends that kind of fall into this area of drafts, they all project so similarly.
yeah,
Like, you're not going to project Dallas Goedert to have a 1,200-yard season because he's never done that before, and he's probably not going to do that. But it's touchdowns that make the difference in that tier, and we have seen as the tush push has become less effective. Now they start doing these little, wrinkles off of the tush push, where it's a fake tush push, and they hand it off to Dallas Goedert, or it's a little pop pass to Dallas Goedert. Like, they're finding creative uses of their biggest guy on the field near the goal line, and I think that's where the value has come from. It's not that Dallas Goedert has blossomed into this, multifunctional tight end who's running every route tree and lining up out wide and doing all sorts of stuff. It's just touchdowns have been going his way the last few years.
well, there's that, but there's also trust when it comes down to it. And when we've seen either Devonta Smith or AJ Brown out of the lineup the last couple of years, Goddard has seamlessly stepped in as the second target there. And it's very obviously that Hurts trusts him. And one of the I was listening to the Eagles talk today, and one of the guys was talking about how the bread and butter play for the Eagles over the last couple of years has basically been sending Jalen Hurts out on a boot rollout where you're putting Dallas Goedert right over the top, and you're putting a defender in the middle, and you're making that defender say, are you going to sit on Goddard here? And Hurts is going to run and bully right into you, or are you going to come up and play Hurts and he's just going to pop it to Goddard, who's sitting there wide open every single time? Like, it's as much as the tush push is the play that will define this era of Eagles football. I mean, when you really watch it, that comes down to like that's their bread and butter play, and that's their most successful play.
Well, let's talk about Jalen Hurts now.
Can we talk about Mekhi Lemon? Like, have a real conversation about Mekhi Lemon?
We did kind of just gloss over him. Yeah, for sure. And yeah, say what you got to say about Mekhi Lemon.
I think that they are fundamentally changing this offensive scheme and structure, and so we haven't talked about Hurts yet. That plays into it, but it's a lot more of a West Coast scheme than it is kind of that RPO heavy scheme. And I think in time there that could develop as the role for Mekhi Lemon. Right now, it feels like a round peg in a square hole, and it feels like the value was right enough in the draft. But I think fundamentally, when you look at traditionally what this offense is operated as, like Casey Conception to me seems like he made more sense than Mekhi Lemon at similar value. I mean, Denzel Boston being on the board a little bit later seemed like it makes a little bit more sense than Mekhi Lemon. And so I think it's going to be really interesting to see, because I mean, we're getting the natural. I understand. I get it. I understand why it happens. Of AJ Brown gets traded, but Kyle Lemon's the wide receiver too, and he's going to be like move him up to the year 102 in your rookie drafts now because he's the clear wide receiver two in Philadelphia. And I think that fundamentally the way that football works, there's going to be an adjustment period to this new offense. There's going to be an adjustment period to working a true slot receiver in here, and there's going to be an adjustment period for Mekhi Lemon to consistently winning outside. And I think it stacks up. I mean, be happy to be wrong, but I think it stacks up more as Wicks being that proven guy that knows the offense, comfortable guy outside, and Lemon kind of being that guy that we are screaming at the TV, wondering why Mekhi Lemon has 2.5 targets and is not playing a lot of snaps.
And you talk about Eli Stowers being viewed as a wide receiver. There's like two plays that really kind of jump out to me that we saw AJ Brown just doing a lot of. Like, I don't want to say that he was limited in Philadelphia because he could do a lot more, but like his usage was limited. And it was either like asking him to run really far down the sidelines. And I think that we will see Mekhi Lemon able to do that, like just immediately. Like, he is a fast guy. He's twitched up. He can separate quickly. He can get deep. But I don't think that he has the size and physicality to do the middle of the field crossers that we saw from AJ Brown. So I think we're going to see a lot of that stuff. Like when we see those, that post route across the middle of the field from the slot or from out wide, I think that's going to be more Eli Stowers. So I think that by drafting these two guys, by drafting Mekhi Lemon and Eli Stowers, they didn't get a one-to-one replacement for A.J. Brown, because I don't think a one-to-one replacement for A.J. Brown exists in the draft. Like, you've got to strike gold to do that, but I think that they kind of recreated A.J. Brown's role through the aggregate with two players here in Mekhi Lemon and Eli Stowers that are both really good at doing one thing immediately, and each of those things is kind of half of what A.J. Brown brought to the table.
Well, and if you're allowed to play 12 with 12 offensive players, then that seems like a really good plan. But until then, AJ Brown's a pretty big thing to lose out of this offense.
Yeah. I'm not trying to downplay the loss. I mean, it is going to be some big changes there. But let's have the Jalen Hurts conversation, Jeff. And the way I want to open this up, Jalen Hurts, per game fantasy production has gone down every single year he has been a starter. Like, we're at the point now where we were talking about this guy as like a top 3 dynasty quarterback. Right side of the age curve, winning a Super Bowl, getting a mega extension, fantasy points galore. But that is just slowly, just like 1 point per game, falls off every single season. And now, again, like I'm going to keep talking about this draft because it's fresh on my mind. I just did this draft on NFFC. I think that we probably overreacted here. But Jalen Hurts fell to the end of round 11, Jeff. And this isn't a Superflex draft. This isn't a best ball draft where teams are, drunk on quarterbacks and drafting 3 by the middle rounds. Like, this is a start 1 quarterback league, so they're going to fall a little bit. But, I mean, Jalen Hurts in this draft goes after Dak Prescott, after Brock Purdy, after Trevor Lawrence, after Justin Herbert, Jaden Daniels, Caleb Williams, everybody else that you expect. I kind of get it. Like, this is a guy who's been trending down every single year, losing A.J. Brown. Tush Push has lost his effectiveness. Could you see Jalen Hurts, as crazy as it sounds, being one of those landmines in drafts this year?
Well, I think that some level there's a similar conversation as Jackson Dart, is there are fundamental things within Jalen Hurts' game that prevents him from bottoming out, that there are natural paths to him accruing fantasy points that would prevent that. And it's funny, he's coming off a career high in touchdown passes, and we admit that offense was a mess because of the Kevin Petulu. We have an obvious scapegoat for why that offense struggled so badly last year. And it's, I mean, the rushing production, it's down slightly, but when it comes down to not running quite as much. But I do think that one of the things that the talk has been they need to get back to that because that makes Hurts more comfortable. To allow him to have that run around and go out. And so I think that that's getting back to that in key part of that game, I think is in Hurts is wheelhouse that where he has to get to, and that's what leads into fantasy production. And while it's trending downwards, it's one of those that like I keep the Paul Skeens like meme where it's like his ERA is like 1.69 and then the next year it's 1.7 and then the next year it's 1.71 and it's like, oh, he's really trending in the wrong direction here. It's still elite level fantasy quarterback, and
Yeah,
there's
like this guy might have a 2.0 ERA by the time he's 60.
yeah,
Oh no.
so we might be in trouble here, but it's still, and there's a really weird narrative about like I think it's legitimate in terms of the Philadelphia Eagles thinking about maybe Jalen Hurts is not the quarterback that they want for their franchise long term. That doesn't mean that there's not 15 other teams that would say, yes, we would gladly take Jalen Hurts right now because the stuff we're dealing with, and some of it's like first world problems.
You don't think
where
the Cleveland Browns would give Jalen Hurts $250 million to come be their long-term quarterback?
Pittsburgh Steelers, you want to play some physical quarterback,
Yeah.
physical football and bring Hurts across the state there? I mean, there are a handful of, it's like, we everybody was off Kyler Murray, and this Kyler Murray's done because the Cardinals have moved on, and then goes out and it's like 6 teams are like, please Kyler Murray, please come be our quarterback here. And I think that's what gets lost in the narrative of the conversation and narrative around the Eagles thinking, we don't know if Hurts, we want him to be the guy. And some of that comes down to the Eagles being a confident franchise that thinks that they can find another solution and is looking at what Hurts' salary does to their overall team build when it comes down to it. And it's the like the Russell Westbrook, a little bit of it, of like Russell Westbrook can give you so many different things, but it also takes things off the table that can be frustrating when it comes to overall team optimization. And when you're the Eagles, that you're so aggressive and so forward thinking that you are really concerned about, does this give us our optimal outcome here relative to again, like the Cleveland Browns or the Steelers or these other teams? And so I think that there's two, like you need a divorce that the Eagles might move on from Jalen Hurts to the Jalen Hurts is not one of the 32 best quarterbacks in the NFL and can go somewhere else and still be scoring fantasy points.
I think the last thing to talk about in this team, Jeff, is the backfield. It's the Saquon Barkley show. We know that. If Saquon Barkley, things are going so well in his life that he says, I'm going to take a couple weeks off of football, as we've been talking about on this series, would it be Will Shipley or Tank Bigsby, you think, that steps into that role, or a combination of the two?
I think it would be a combination of the two. I think that they like the dynamic element that Shipley gives them, but I don't think they have any confidence that he can stay healthy and hold up to the brutal beating that would come down to it. So I think Bigsby would be that volume guy, and then Shipley would be in for big plays and potential passing downs. I would expect that they would split between the two of them, but we did see Shipley have a little bit of a role to start last year prior to having an injury prior to that trade to Tank Bigsby. I think they like Shipley, but I think they recognize that he's not going to hold
a rib
up
in week 1.
Yeah.
Like before halftime of week 1, he cracked a rib on special teams, and that was kind of the end. And I'm just laughing now at Howie Roseman just sitting there like, you know what? Do we need Jalen Hurts? Like, we got rid of A.J. Brown and we moneyballed that with Mekhi Lemon and Eli Stowers, and maybe we can moneyball our way at quarterback with Cole Payton and Tanner McKee. And do we really need Saquon Barkley, or can we just Will Shipley and Tank Bigsby? Like, how deep can they go with the moneyball approach? Because, like you said, this is a very, very confident franchise. But do we have anything else to really say? I mean, like Saquon Barkley, we could talk about him. We know the upside. We know the breakaway plays weren't there last year. I think we chalk up a lot of the fall-off inefficiency to probably just the usage the year before. So, if the usage the year before is the reason he fell off, maybe the lower usage last year means that he bounces back. I mean, I'm talking myself in circles. I think Saquon Barkley, where he's going right now, like kind of at the end of round 2, very fair value. You can take him there and feel good about it. And if you pass on him, I don't know if he's going to have that record-breaking season like he did 2 years ago again.
Well, I mean, yes. I don't know that he's going to be a 2,000-yard running back
Right.
again. Like I don't know he's going to do the thing that only a handful of guys have ever done again. He could, though, but I think that it's I attribute a lot to the coaching on last year's
Yeah.
offense, and especially when it comes down to Saquon Barkley, and all the conversations around the team attribute Saquon Barkley last year to the coaching. And Kevin
Yeah.
Petula is not a popular guy in Philadelphia, and I think that really it was the coaching was a major part of it. And talked before about good offensive coordinators are going to scheme their wide receivers to run these decoy routes away from where the defenders are in the run is supposed to go, and bad offensive coordinators are going to run them right into the zone. And I think there was a lot of stuff with Kevin Petula's offense that the breakaway runs weren't there, and I don't think it had as much to do with Saquon Barkley and hitting a certain number of touches in 24 as much as it did of him not being in a very good scheme and system. But Dave, I want to give you let's think about this here. He does have the 6th best odds to lead the league in rushing. Is that how many names? So I guess, but like fundamentally, I want to ask, to have Saquon Barkley in your projected group of league leading rushers, how many names do you need for running backs to include him there? Of like who do you think is going to lead the league in rushing yards? Like how many do you have to pull away before Saquon Barkley leaves that group?
I mean, it's Bijan, Gibbs, Henry, Hampton.
Oh, you got
Walker.
Hampton up there?
I do. I'm very bullish
Walker
on Hampton
too
this year.
Yeah, because Jonathan Taylor and Derrick Henry have the best odds to lead the league in rushing. Yeah. James Cook is Jonathan second. Taylor, Gibbs is third.
James Cook, yeah.
Bijan Robinson and Gibbs are tied, and then Barkley's 6th.
I think Saquon being top 6 in rushing wouldn't surprise me, but we also know that targets are worth 2.5 times as much.
But I'm not asking
carry,
about
so
being top 6 in rushing. I'm asking about leading the league in rushing.
All right. Yeah, I think that his odds deserve to be top 6 in leading the league in rushing. I think that it is not very likely, but I'd say probably like a 10 to 15% outcome that Saquon Barkley leads the league in rushing.
Yeah, I'm team Saquon now because I got him in the middle of the 3rd round of my Scott Fishbowl draft. So I didn't take that all day.
And, like I said, the rushing is undoubtedly going to be there. I think that he's going to be one of those guys, but, there just isn't a lot of pass volume in this offense, and there certainly isn't a lot of checkdowns to the running backs either. Like, Jalen Hurts isn't going to check down. He's going to run the ball instead. So I think that's the big problem here is, like, he can get there as a rusher, but, we're kind of looking at, like, that Derrick Henry-ish, maybe a little bit higher. Like, we know Saquon Barkley is a very, very good pass catcher. Don't hear what I'm not saying. I just don't know if there's a role for a pass-catching running back in this offense.
Are we sure? Because
I mean, I haven't seen Josh Jacobs catch a ton of passes over the last couple of years, and then Jalen Hurts checks down even less.
Well, Josh Jacobs'
does.
Receiving ability is completely different than Saquon Barkley's receiving ability. And as we look for answers on where is going to be the number 2 target within this offense, I mean, he's the most dynamic guy with the ball in his hands. We know we've seen him be an elite level receiving back before. I'm not saying that I think that it would be. I'm just asking
target
the questions.
Total years. Yeah, and I was just, aside from the year that he tore his ACL in week 3, his 2 lowest target total years have been the 2 years that he's been in Philadelphia. So even though he's getting like workhorse treatment, and maybe things change up with Sean Mannion, that's always like we're always pontificating and guessing about what's going to happen with a new coaching staff. I just don't know if that's in Jalen Hurts' bag. Like if Jalen Hurts drops back and his first read's not open, second read's not open, I don't think he's making his way to a third read in Saquon Barkley. I think that it's in his instinct to just run the ball, and that takes away a lot of the pass-catching upside for a running back.
Well, what if you just make Saquon Barkley the first option in the route?
Then we got a very different conversation. Yeah, if they just say that, hey, we're going to build this entire offense around Saquon Barkley, then we're looking at Saquon Barkley 2 years ago where he breaks fantasy football and he's given us 28 points per game. And maybe that does happen coming off of the year with lesser usage where they say, hey, this was the Super Bowl winning formula right here. But also, we saw the wear and tear that took on Saquon Barkley's body. The upside is undeniable. The downside, is obviously the downside that he's an aging running back that doesn't catch a lot of passes on what could be a low volume offense. So, like I said, I think he's valued very appropriately, Jeff. Where he's going at like the end of round 2, I think that's about where he should be going in drafts. Um, and then
Drafted at his
I think you're
floor,
probably right.
to be honest.
What was that?
I think he's being drafted at his floor.
Really? All
Yeah.
right. Maybe I need to start drafting a little bit more Saquon Barkley. But anyway, let's move on to the last team here, Jeff. The Washington Commanders, the last team of the NFC East, and this is one we are definitely going to start with a quarterback. But first, let's go through the changes. Hired offensive coordinator David Blau. They lost Josh Johnson, Austin Eckler, Debo Samuel, Noah Brown, Zach Ertz. A lot of veterans moving on here. They brought in Chigakonkwo, Diami Brown, Rashad White, Jerome Ford, Van Jefferson, and then in the draft, they brought in wide receiver Antonio Williams, early third-round pick, Katron Allen, who they spent I forget if it was a 5th or 6th round pick, but a day 3 pick nevertheless. And then they brought in a round 7 quarterback. I will let you, Ethan Kalikabanis, I believe is how you say that one. Probably not threatening Jaden Daniels for his job. But let's start with Jaden Daniels here, Jeff. We saw, just we throw around the term breaking fantasy football a lot, and I almost said that. The reality is, like, Jalen Hurts didn't break fantasy football. He was a very productive quarterback his rookie season, but we expected that. Like, we know he's a very good rusher, and he was drafted high, and he paid off at his ADP. Year 2, completely different story. He's got the elbow injury on the field, off the field. When he's playing, he's not effective. It was just a disaster year 2 season. And I know Washington fans are sweating. Like, it's starting to feel a little RG3-ish here, but I think it's too early to write that story on Jaden Daniels. You've got to just expect a bounce back, right? Like, getting too worried about the long-term future because of one down year. Like, we've got to expect that Jaden Daniels just returns to being the player that he was.
I would expect so. They definitely have a better offensive line in front of him. I mean, they don't have better receiving weapons probably than what they had last year. But I think, yes, when it comes down to, yes, you should expect a bounce back. And this is the philosophical episode, because I already talked about my belief on the city's good vibes. And another thing that I believe is you get these NFL teams that are really on just the edge, where they could be a 6-11 team or they could be an 11-6 team. And the way that 2024 season started with the Commanders, there was the wonky game against the Giants where the Giants didn't have a kicker, and they would have beat them easily if they could have kicked literally anything at all, but they couldn't. And then there was that weird game against the Bengals when the Bengals were just shooting themselves in the foot and falling all over themselves, a back and forth game that the Commanders pulled out. And I think that the Commanders at that point in time, obviously we know they earned the 2nd pick in the draft. Getting Daniels there, it was just like one of those things that there's so much belief and everything is clicking with Daniels, who was on just this ridiculous run because he had just won the Heisman Trophy and just a very, very high run there. And that just the belief was flowing throughout the team, and they performed way, way above the talent around them. I think that had those games gone a different direction, you probably would have had another death march, like 4-13 type of a Commander season, because I think truly that's probably where the talent level lies on this team. And it all comes down to we've already talked about how much gets put on Patrick Mahomes. I think a lot is put on Jalen Daniels, and he definitely has the opportunity, the ability to be a dominant fantasy football quarterback and just dominant quarterback in general, but it's going to be on him, and he's really going to have to show growth and come back healthy, show growth from that sophomore season, because that can be a lot and for him, it's first time that he tastes disappointment, defeat at the NFL level, more or less.
And, it seemed like 2024, like, you can look at the team and you said, like, this isn't the long-term plan. Zach Ertz, Debo, like, it was just these older guys, Austin Eckler, like, you knew that wasn't the long-term plan. And this year they just said, like, we're clearing house. Like, we are getting rid of all of these veterans, and we're going to bring in young players. Chigakonkwo, Diami Brown, Jerome Ford, they got a couple veterans mixed in there, but then also hitting Antonio Williams, Katrin Allen in the draft. This to me feels like, we can't keep slapping these veteran band-aids on here. Like, we need to give some sort of core that Jaden Daniels can build chemistry with and develop long term. And I think that's the right move. Like, it's okay to have one or two of these developmental guys to help a young quarterback, but when your whole team is aging veterans who already have their sights on retiring and, vacationing in Cancun, it's kind of tough where now I see this roster and now I see a lot of younger guys. I see a little bit more energy in the depth chart. I see some hungrier players out here. And I think this could be one of those developmental years with some growing pains, but I think that this is what he needs if he wants to be a player who's still going to be around and still be productive 4 or 5 years from now.
Exactly. And you're exactly right there. And we're betting on upside. We want to bet on outliers, and that's exactly what Daniels gives. And when you're looking at drafts, where I've seen him going in drafts, the sure running backs are off the board. The wide receivers that you feel really good about are kind of off the board. There's value tight ends, but you're obviously not getting Bowers, McBride there. And to me, he's sitting at a very, very appealing spot in drafts. I'm drafting a lot of Jaden Daniels because you want to bet on the upside, you want to bet on the ability that he offers, and he's got it in a way that very, very, very few players do.
So Jeff, I'm looking at your projections here, and the purpose of the show is never ever to try to poke holes in your logic or your projections or anything like that, but I see the receiver that you have with the second most targets on the team before Terry McLaurin, or behind Terry McLaurin, I should say, and I think this would surprise a lot of people. A lot of excitement brewing for Antonio Williams. And like I said, a third-round pick. Like, the reality is these third-round picks, they don't hit all that often. And sure, there's size and speed and athleticism and things to like about Antonio Williams. But who do you think is going to be the wide receiver 2 here?
Well, Chig Okonkwo is going to be the wide receiver 2 when it comes.
Yes, we were going to get to him. But I said the wide receiver 2, Jeff.
I had Traylon Burks as the wide receiver 2 for the Commanders.
And I mean, by a hair. Like, you've got 5 targets separating him from Antonio Williams, but nevertheless, that's a statement.
It definitely is a statement, and I really wish I could attribute who had it. Somebody had a really good tweet, because like a lot of the news that was coming out about the Commanders and like the coaching staff.
I think it was Pat Thorman.
Maybe
I saw Pat Thorman recently had a good tweet about that about Burks.
Yeah, it might have been Pat, and Pat's very, very sharp, and he's on it. But somebody's talking about like basically they were talking about the receivers, and they were like, yeah, Luke McCaffrey came back, and Jalen Lane is on the team, and we got Diami Brown, but Traylon Burks has looked amazing. And it's like just like the general vibe around the coaching staff is basically like, yeah, we've got these other guys, but Burks is really looking good. And I think you fundamentally, when you look at it, I mean, he can win outside. He can bring physicality in a way that Antonio Williams, and maybe it's just me I wasn't super high on Antonio Williams as a prospect, and I can understand the vacant target argument, the ability for him to be the wide receiver 2 potentially, but I think at a football level, I mean, I think Burks is going to offer things that the rookie Williams might not offer. And I think Antonio Williams, I mean, I've got Chig Okonkwo as my number 2 target earner on this team. Antonio Williams, slot receiver, kind of operates in a similar area of the field, I think, as Okonkwo would. Mm-hmm. And if you're going to run 12 personnel, if you're going to have 2 tight ends, you're going to treat Okonkwo kind of as a flex tight end that moves around. I mean, there's some overlap there with Williams, whereas Burks, boy, there's just not a lot of overlap with somebody on the roster that offers his skill set.
Traylon Burks had 1 target from Jaden Daniels last year, Jeff, and he caught it for a touchdown. So, if we're extrapolating your 78 targets over the efficiency that we saw last year from Jaden Daniels, I think you're way too short on the fantasy production here. Tongue in cheek, of course. But yeah, I mean, like Traylon Burks, this is a former first rounder who just like injuries, and like sometimes it just requires a change of scenery for these guys to put it together. So I like that call out quite a bit, because everybody gets rookie drunk and just falls in love with these third round guys, when the reality is, like, if you want to compare prospect to prospect, Traylon Burks clears Antonio Williams in every facet.
Well, and we're really bearing the lead on who probably will be the wide receiver 2 here. It's probably going to be Brandon Ayuk. If that does reach resolution. If it doesn't, I mean, Stephon Diggs is still sitting out there, and that
Yeah.
could be
Yeah.
Stephon Diggs. I would be a little bit surprised if it's not somebody. The 49ers have no real incentive to they certainly can't
Right.
trade Brandon Ayuk, and they have no real incentive to release Brandon Ayuk unless Brandon Ayuk says, here's all your money back. I want to go do something else. But I think it's going to come down to it on, I mean, maybe if he doesn't report and they can put him on like non-reporting list or something, like hide him on like the fake IR or something like that. But to me, I think looks like it's going to be the
They
type of
did
thing
last
where,
year. They put him on a list I had never even heard of.
yeah,
It was like the failed to report to the team list or something. It was something so weird that I had to Google it because I was like, I have never, ever seen this before.
it feels to me like they're just going to find the heck out of him until the very last day, and then they'll cut him on the last day when you drop the 53-man rosters, and then he'll sign in Washington, and he'll just be behind the 8 ball and getting up to speed, and whether or not he actually can after really not playing football for 2 years, it seems at this point. But I do think that the dots are there, easy, very easy to connect. He definitely has ties to Jaden Daniels from their Arizona State days, but it's one of those that, or we've seen. I don't think Brian Thomas is on the trade block, but I was going to say we've seen before where the Commanders be a very aggressive team in trades, and if that were to happen, Thomas really were to become available. He's deep ties with Jaden Daniels from their LSU days. That might be a player they go after. I just would be surprised if it really is just Terry McLaurin and nobody else.
Yeah.
But man, right now the numbers, the numbers for Terry McLaurin though in my spreadsheet are very, very favorable for Terry McLaurin.
Yeah, and I think Chigakonkwo too. You talk about it like he is a tight end, but there are different types of tight ends, as we just talked about with Dallas Goedert and Eli Stowers. And Zach Ertz was like such a master of his craft, just like knowing how to find that soft spot in the zone. You know, he'd see how defenses were playing him and might get off to a slow start, but then was just like wide open in the second half of every single game because he would just have that natural instinctual feel for the game. That's not what Chigakonkwo does. Chigakonkwo is very much so a Deebo Samuel type of player. Like, you get him the ball at the line of scrimmage, and he is big, and he is fast, and he will run through dudes. So I think that he is going to do exactly what Deebo Samuel was kind of doing in this offense, playing out of the slot, getting some gimmicky touches, and I think that gives him a lot of appeal in fantasy because a lot of Deebo Samuel's usage came near the red zone. So I could see Chigakonkwo having double-digit touchdowns in this offense just alone, like just on that creative usage alone. So Chigakonkwo is a player I really like. Terry McLaurin, as it stands right now, I like a lot. You know, like you said, if they bring in an Ayuk or a Diggs, then we change things a little bit. But this backfield may be one of the most muddy of all the backfields. We've talked about a lot of backfields. We've talked about a lot of muddy backfields. But you look at this one here. I mean, they brought in so many free agents. And, like, I don't even know if we know who the week one roster is going to look like. Like they brought Jeremy McNichols back. They brought in Jerome Ford. They brought in Rashad White. They drafted Katron Allen. Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt is still there. How many running backs do you think make the 53-man roster? And once you put a number to that, then give me the names that you expect to be on that 53-man roster in week one.
I think four will make the roster. If this coaching McNichols versus Ford might be the really interesting one because Ford probably has a little bit more juice to give in the offense, but McNichols is one of those guys that we see at the tail end of rosters where, it's just like, I mean, I remember Bill Parcells. I think
he's more Samaje Perine is like, I get Samaje Perine vibes from Jeremy McNichols. Just does the dirty work and the older guy that's always around.
Just does all the right things. He's on major contributor on special teams. Like Bill Parcells, I feel like always had like his 7 guys. We see with Arthur Smith, like Arthur Smith goes somewhere. He's calling up the who's the wide receiver? I can't think of his name. Scotty Miller is calling up Scotty Miller. He's going to see what Van Jefferson's doing. And, you know, he's going to bring Jonnu Smith along now. It's like one of those things. I feel like Jeremy McNichols is just one of those guys for Dan Quinn on. He just makes the roster. But other than that, I think there's 3 running backs here that are worth talking about in fantasy football that when it really comes down to it, you might have a 4th guy that's a contributor to special teams. But Rashad White, Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, and Katron Allen. And like you said, this could break in 3 different directions. I mean, I know the guy that I
Or it
would
could
bet
break in
on
all
to,
three directions.
well, it could break in all 3 directions. I know the guy that I would bet on to be involved in the passing game. I know that much. And there's been talk
Rashad
that
White.
Rachaad White, there's been talk that they missed the Austin Eckler role, that they want that passing down running back, and White again knows Daniels from the Arizona State days. And there's a reason why he signed here. And so I'm comfortable that we can project some level of role to Rachaad White. But the other 2 backs was an interesting conversation.
Well, I want to say this about Rashad White really quickly, and I think I mentioned this on a show with Joey Wright a while back, and I haven't mentioned it on a show with you. So I'm going to quiz you real quickly. You know, the EPA. Everybody loves EPA. You know, EPA tells you just one number that tells you if a player is good or if a player is bad. And Rashad White, when he was the RB4 in fantasy football a few years ago, he was 140th in the league in EPA, and that's why everybody just said Rashad White is not good at football. This guy is terrible. Can't get any more touches. What do you think he was in EPA last year, Jeff?
Well, probably first because you're asking me the question, but we saw he would come in
Ninth.
as a change of pace and just be explosive because he
Yeah,
wasn't getting
that's what happens.
beaten by baseball bats and socks full of pennies over and over again. And he was able to be fresh and run with some excitement.
Well, not quite first, but he was ninth. But like
Okay.
still top 10 in the league in EPA, and like we see this all the time. Like he had such a massive role a couple of years ago that he wasn't really in a position to do what he does best. He was a 3-down running back, and he is not a between the tackles runner. He's a passing down specialist. He's a fantastic pass blocker, great route runner, great hands, can do a lot after the catch as well. So I think that's going to be the role for him very, very clearly. So that kind of leaves us with Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt and Katron Allen. Now, I like Katron Allen. I have been an unabashed Katron Allen tout since January when we started doing this whole rookie scouting thing. I think he's a very good, very underrated running back. But, you know, you compare what Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt does and what Katron Allen does. This, to me, feels very similar to the Chris Rodriguez, funny enough, former Washington commander, Chris Rodriguez and Bashal Tutin, where like Tutin and Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt, they might have a little bit more juice, but also struggle with some of the important aspects of being a running back. Meanwhile, you've got Katron Allen, very similar to Chris Rodriguez, might not have the juice, but can keep an offense on schedule, knows how to hit his gaps, can break tackles, very effective near the goal line. So to me, like everything that we're saying, like I feel like we're just having the entire conversation about the Jacksonville backfield all over again, but like Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt can be that guy that ends up with the touches between the 20s on early downs, which are just very low calorie touches that don't amount to a lot of fantasy production, where Rachaad White's getting all the passing down work, Katron Allen's getting all the red zone work, and Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt might lead the team in touches, but if they're all low value touches, like what does that really matter?
Well, again, we buy values. And this is where what we do. I remember when I started making fantasy football content, and at Football Guys, Jeff Hasley had said something that really stuck with me. And he said that it's really hard to be both a good fantasy football player and a good fantasy football analyst. And like this is us playing poker with our cards facing up. But why can we get Katron Allen in the 17th round of every single draft? It blows my mind. It blows my mind.
Jeff, what do you think my exposure's at right now?
Yeah, I was going to say, this is going to be the question that we're going to have. I would say you're probably about 65%.
84%.
Good,
Like,
Dave. I need to pull mine up here.
Every single draft. Like, this is the easiest click to make right now. Like, sure, he might be nothing. He might also be a guy who handles 70% of the touches in this backfield because he just separates himself as the best running back in this backfield. And when you are looking at these ambiguous backfields, like we see Bashal Tutin getting steamed up, we see Chris Rodriguez getting steamed up, we see Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt and Rachaad White getting steamed up, and Katron Allen is just the guy that like has the unknown upside that nobody seems to care about for whatever reason. And you know, it's not just me. Like, I like Katron Allen. I know you like Katron Allen as well. Matt Waldman likes Katron Allen. Sigmund Bloom likes Katron Allen. Like, there are a lot of respected voices who do this for a living that watched Katron Allen and said, this is a good running back who landed on a team without many good running backs in the backfield. Like, this guy can just flat out win the job on his own accord.
I'm only at 28%, Dave. So you win.
I mean, that is still like over 3 times more than the field. Like, you are still, that is a lot. Like, you're not an absolute sicko like me. You're doing the smart thing by probably mixing in other late round picks where I'm just going Catron Allen, Catron Allen, Catron Allen, Catron Allen every single draft.
Well, and sometimes it comes down to, I mean, I show you a lot of my drafts. Like sometimes I like to either go like really wide receiver heavy early or really running back heavy
Right.
early, depending on how the board plays. And sometimes I'm desperately taking Brandon Ayuk there,
And
and
me, I'll
sometimes I'm
start
taking Katron Allen there.
I'll start with 4 running backs and then still hit Catron Allen at the
Yeah,
end.
yeah, yeah. I'll do the same thing. Yeah, I definitely. Lately, I've started doing the same thing. I'll start 4 running backs early, and then I won't touch anything, and then I'll get Katron Allen in the 17th round and say I'm perfectly fine with him being my 5th running back in this build. But
Yeah,
it's
and there's been so much good buzz about him. Like, I
yes.
know you said that like a part of your process for the show is to listen. I don't know how many Commanders podcasts you listen to, but I feel like every time I read minicamp reports, it's just like Catron Allen is standing out, doing all the right things, looking good. He's the youngest of the bunch. Like, there's just been nonstop good buzz about Catron Allen.
Well, I mean, you in professional workplaces, or you've seen situations where an employee gets into the situation where like they can't do anything right, basically, and the feedback is basically you did X, Y, and Z wrong, and is how it's being viewed. But it does feel like with Corey Krosky Merritt, the feedback is, well, you're not pass protecting well enough. You're not involved in the passing game to the level that we want you to. You're not hitting the holes right. Like it's all the demerits to Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt, and like Katron Allen is the new guy over here that's getting his timesheets in on time, and he's doing all the things right. And you're like, oh, okay, well, he's doing all
So,
the things
so
we
you
want to
talk
do.
about that. Like, the problem with Ja'Cory Krosky Merritt, vision, finding his blockers, all that sort of stuff. Listen to this quote from today's minicamp. Catron Allen has looked solid in practice so far, showing off his vision and ability to read blockers during running drills. Like, that's what he does. Like, he is just, and that is what Chris Rodriguez does. And we saw last year that when Chris Rodriguez was healthy, he was the preferred back in this offense. And they are such similar players. Like, you look at what Chris Rodriguez did last year. He broke tackles. He had one of the league's best success rates. He generated yards after contact. He was top 5 in all of those metrics. That's where Catron Allen excels. He's not the guy that can do what Corey Krosky Merritt does, where he can house a ball for 70 yards. But Corey Krosky Merritt would have this team playing behind the sticks because he'd be dancing around in the backfield, take a 6-yard loss on first down, and then they're 2nd and 16, and that's just a drive killer. Catron Allen isn't going to do that. He is going to just keep an offense on schedule and always make the right read. And Dan Quinn has shown us that that is what he values in a running back. I mean, Dan Quinn, correct me if I'm wrong, I'm pretty sure Dan Quinn was in Atlanta when Tyler Algier had his 1,000-yard season. Tyler Algier isn't a juiced-up running back. He is just a disciplined, smart, good vision, good footwork running back.
Dan Quinn was like the Devonta Freeman Falcons era. So that was Arthur Smith with Tyler Algier. So that was a little gap between those. But Dan Quinn was kind of more like, but it was the Devonta Freeman, Tevin Coleman conversation where Tevin Coleman was this explosive back, but wasn't necessarily doing what he was supposed to do. And Devonta Freeman wasn't the most explosive back, but he did the right things. But we're seeing new offense coordinator David Blau comes in, and David Blau worked with Ben Johnson. And when it comes down to it, of these, the Ben Johnson, the like the Mike McDaniel, I think has it, or like the Kyle Shanahan of it, of there are the way that these minds think offensively is they're working the defense on here, and they need the running back to get 3 yards in this hole to set up what they're going to do next. And when they don't have that running back that can get 3 yards on this play to set up what they're going to do next, then it messes everything up. And they are very particular. I mean, like the why Olamide Zaccheaus, basically Olamide Zaccheaus versus DJ Moore conversation with the Bears last year, where Olamide Zaccheaus did exactly what the coaches wanted him to, was in the exact right spot, and nobody knew where DJ Moore was going to be. And like you play with a Sandlot, you play with a Sandlot quarterback, that can work. But if you play within a scheme and system and an offensive mind that says you need to do exactly this, and that sets up the next thing, that's a very big deal. And the quote came out about the Jaguars running back and about Chris Rodriguez and getting 3 yards, and it was dunked on of like, oh yeah, that's what I want. I want a running back that gets me 3 yards. But it is they want the running back that does the right thing. And I think Katron Allen, you make the case for it that he's going to be the running back that does the right thing. And the value, that's where it really comes down to. The value's free. It is a free square. And
Yeah.
I don't
I mean,
know
he was a
why.
fourth round rookie pick.
Yeah.
And I get it. Like, he's a day 3 running back, but we've talked so much about how this is a weak rookie class that, like, why not take the shot on a guy who's Penn State's all-time leading rusher, who is on a backfield where he has every opportunity to just take the job? Jeff, these episodes can be a slog at times. Talking for an hour and 45 minutes, 2 hours, they can be tough. My butt is sore by the time we're done recording, but getting to finish with a nice bullish conversation on Katron Allen for the last 10 minutes, that was the perfect way to wrap the show up. That makes me feel great. Any final thoughts on the Washington Commanders, the NFC East as a whole, or do we just want to keep gushing about Katron Allen a little bit more?
No, I just think this is a fun division because of the changes that we've seen, and can the Commanders bounce back? What does this new offense look like? There's a lot of questions with these teams, with the Commanders, with the Eagles, with the Giants, present a lot of questions. The Cowboys probably present the most clarity, which means the way that things usually work, the Cowboys will be the most insane out of this bunch, because that's how it usually plays out. But I think it's an exciting time for this division. You can feel kind of the shifts maybe of this division, where the Eagles have been very dominant in control, and can Dallas put this defense together? Can the Commanders bounce back? Can John Harbaugh come and institute a really just a mentality in New York? And I think it's going to be really, really interesting to watch. And it is the NFC East. We will get plenty of opportunities to watch. I haven't seen the primetime schedule, but something tells me that there will be a few NFC East games in primetime this year.
As there always is. Well, I want to thank y'all so much for taking the time to hang out today. If you made it to this point of the show and haven't liked this video by now on YouTube, haven't left a YouTube comment, haven't left a podcast review or any of those things, this is your second ask to do that. Helps the show grow tremendously. And Jeff, we are quickly approaching the red zone. Like, it is happening quick. So this is when we really want this show getting on as many eyes as possible. So please help share the show. Let us know what you like. Let us know what you dislike. And be sure to subscribe so you can see when we wrap up this series. We've got 3 more NFC episodes coming your way. Thank y'all so much for tuning in, and we will see you soon.